We thank Representative Scott Cepicky for filling us in on exactly, what we know about the particulars of a bill, an act that was unveiled by the governor yesterday. The expectation is this will be much discussed, much debated in the General Assembly coming in January. It is the Education Freedom Scholarship Act. And as a way of continuing the conversation, we welcome you back, Scott Cepicky. Some of the broad concerns that we are seeing from educational institutions around the state and other lawmakers around the state are that this is a program designed just for rich kids. And we kind of addressed that last hour, but I want to further that discussion. So help those just joining us, maybe we've got people just tuning in, understand exactly what this program would do. We talked about school choice as it exists already in the state of Tennessee, public to public. How do you believe that this will benefit Tennessee families individually as they inquire about the program? Tell me what it would do for them.
Well, the person who is in charge of the students, quote unquote, child's educational future and current is the parent. It's the parent's job to figure out what's best, because who knows the child the best is the parent. If they feel that they're in a situation that their child's needs are not getting addressed, even with the additional funding we put in there with the new TISA funding formula, and they think they want to try a different outcome or different experience for their child that's going to meet their needs, this grant program, this scholarship program will step in there and allow this parent to have a choice to put their student in a better situation for a better outcome. Now, you said something earlier that kind of tweaked my interest. You said that you don't have any children and you may not have a dog in this hunt, but Matt, you live in the great state of Tennessee. And able for Tennessee to succeed in the future, we have to make sure that the kids that are graduating our schools are able to fulfill the needs of Tennessee moving forward when you eventually one day stop doing this job, or you stop being a carpenter, or you stop being an electrician or a doctor or a pharmacist, right? We have to make sure the educational system is cranking out these kids that are able to perform at the levels that Tennessee expects, that you expect as a taxpayer. Is our public school system doing that right now? I don't think so. And I can give you a chapter and verse on data and statistics that says it's not happening. We have to provide another avenue, and I think what Governor Lee has done and the speakers have got behind is that an idea of we've got to give parents another choice.
How many kids are going to school in Tennessee, roughly?
1 million.
Right now? About 1 million.
About 1 million. And it's been stagnant for a while because some are losing, some are gaining.
Do you know off the top of your head how many kids go to private school in Tennessee?
Roughly 100,000.
About 100,000.
Yes.
So this could potentially add 20,000 students to private schools their enrollment.
That's correct.
And this is a bill that deals with giving parents a financial ability to get their kids out of a public education system that they do not believe is best benefiting their child.
Correct.
And putting them in private or homeschool.
Correct.
How does the homeschool component work? Let me ask you this before I ask that. How does the money work? Does the money that is being provided, I know that the governor's office and others, they don't want to call it a voucher. So what are we calling it? Is it a monetary payment to the parents? Is it going to the school itself? How does that work?
So I can tell you this, on a student that's going to attend a private school, right? We are not going to send the money to that parent and then they write a check to that private school. The private school will accept that student, and all students are identified. We know we can track them all through an identifiable number. And then we know to send that tuition, that $7,000, if that's what it is, we know to send it to that school. But we don't send it all at one time. We send it in increments so that as long as the student stays engaged there, we continue to fund that scholarship. Because when you go to a private school, you have the option to pay up front or you can pay monthly. So we'll break this down. What gets a little wonky here, there's a good word for you.
I like it.
Is how do we handle homeschools? Now, first of all, homeschoolers want nothing to do with government education, like nothing to do with it. So we're going to have to put some parameters in there that protects the homeschool population from overbearance of the state or federal government. Now, this is all state money. So the federal government's out of this. I shouldn't have said that. That's my mistake. This is state money. So they want to make sure as homeschoolers, they wanted the autonomy to be homeschoolers to begin with. How do we allow them to access this grant? And that's what we're waiting for the language to come down from the governor and from his staff on how are we going to put homeschoolers in a position that they want to accept the money.
I'm a little confused. If I make a decision to what is the cost dynamic there? If I make a decision to homeschool my children, is that going to cost me $7,000?
Probably not. But there's, if you pool, and what in my mind, if you look at the bill,
you understand what I'm saying?
I do.
Yeah,
I do. If you look at the bill, there's different levels of approved schools, level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? You could have a bunch of homeschoolers, let's say 10 homeschoolers, that want to take each their $7,000, pool that money together, go out to a local business that has a room, rent that room for the year, and go out and hire a teacher to teach their kids.
Haven't we just created a private school?
In a small scale, yes, you have. But
then at what point do those systems need to be accredited?
So that's what's really interesting. And I told you about giving credit to Illinois here. Illinois put some parameters in place that says unable to receive the scholarship, right? Mm-hmm. As a entity, you have to be either accredited or approved by the State Board of Education or by a nationally recognized board. Homeschoolers, classical education people, they are accredited by a national organization. And that's how they get their bona fides. I think we're going to put some guardrails. And that's why I keep telling people is this is just the beginning. What this bill's going to look like at the end, I guarantee you is going to look like a lot different than what we're just going to look at when we get it.
How are we as a state paying for this? Math, and I want to try to demonstrate my public education from Georgia. It's is it 140? Is that what you got? 140 million?
Yeah. So if it's $7,000, 20,000 students, you're looking at 140 million. Now it gets tricky year two, because in the governor's proposal, in the 25-26 school year, he opens it up to every student statewide. But here's where,
so the 20,000 cap is just a first year,
according to what we've been told from the governor's release. It's 1 year, the first year out. And what that does is it buys them the ability to get that next year of that ESA plan we talked about earlier, to get another year of data there too. So those students take a priority. So it's $10,000 for 300% of poverty. And I know what that is here because I went and got it for you. For a family of, let's say, 4, that's $90,000 a year. So if you make less than $90,000 a year, you would qualify under that 300% of federal poverty.
So you go to the front of the line on.
You got it.
On the 20,000.
And if your child has a disability, they go to the front of the line. So
what about, and I've heard from a number of people over the last several days as we kind of speculate as to what's going to be in the legislation. Mm-hmm. There are some that are suggesting, and I don't know, that most private schools cost more than $7,000 a year.
That's correct.
So if I'm, for example, if I'm at the poverty level, or if I'm a little above the poverty level, say 200%, make $70,000 a year, that $7,000 isn't getting me all the way there.
Well, it is in Nashville, because we've got over 1,000 students that are already taking advantage of it, and there are even stricter guidelines on poverty levels. So the suggestion is that you'll have to make a determination as to which private school that you go to. There are some private schools that are at that $7,000 level, right, that you would point toward, as opposed to some of the more expensive ones. Is there a way to, are we going to carve out a way for a supplement? In other words, if you get me the 7,000 and the tuition is 10, I can supplement the rest of the 3? Correct.
That's the idea.
Right. And so remember, when you go to private school now, you have the ability as an individual to apply for financial aid on top of a scholarship.
And that will still be available to those.
That's correct. And so let's say a private school costs you $14,000.
Okay.
And you qualify for the 7, so now you're down to $7,000, and you apply for financial aid and they grant you $3,500. Well, now, to enable for your child to attend that school is going to cost you $3,500.
Out of pocket for the parent.
Correct. So it's not only those parents that are looking to get into private school that can't afford it. It's those parents that are looking to get into private school that if you help me, I can make up the difference.
And so how many states have already done a version of this?
Off the top of my head, I think it's 9.
Where would you point to in your research and understanding as to a state that most closely resembles what we're trying to do in Tennessee, or is there one?
Well, I don't. It's hard to answer that, Matt, because I haven't seen the final language. I haven't seen really hardly any language. And so I think one of the success stories you'll be referred to often is Florida.
Okay.
When Florida did this, and the one thing you and I haven't talked about is the capacity. So if we allow these kids to pull these scholarships, right, do we have the capacity for them to end up somewhere? With most private schools in the state on wait lists. That's a whole issue right there. When Florida did this, the privates came in and made tremendous investment in Florida and built private schools all over Florida and created an avenue for these kids to wind up somewhere.
I see what you're saying. So maybe with the 20,000 cap in the first year of the program statewide, you would have maybe you wouldn't, but maybe you have the capacity. Let's say you do.
Let's say you do.
But in the next year, if you open it up and take the cap off, at some point, the private schools are going to fill up.
Well, yeah, they're going to say, I have no capacity anymore. With most schools already, especially in southern middle Tennessee, most schools already being at capacity. So as a board member of a private school, are you going to invest in capital to expand your school for a program that, as you know as well as I do, the General Assembly can end at any time they want?
And for those parents who have already invested in their child's education by sending them to private schools, they're eligible for this program, right?
Every student in the state of Tennessee is eligible as long as there's income, as long as there's revenue funding from the General Assembly. So here's some priorities that'll probably be put in place. If let's say we have 100,000 kids that want to take advantage of this, but we've only, because that's about $1 billion, but the General Assembly's only put $500 million into the program, then now how do you tell somebody no? And I think what you're going to see is the initial part of this that has poverty levels, disabilities, things like that. I think those will take precedent. So we're going to make sure the kids that have the most challenging academic hardships would have the ability to take advantage of this first, which kind of takes away the argument about this is for rich people.
I want to get to as many of you as I possibly can in the next 5 minutes or so. So if you have a question for Scott Cepicky regarding this scholarship fund or act, 615-737-9986.
Can I say one thing?
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Just to remind everybody, this is not my bill.
That's right.
This is the governor's bill.
Well, yeah, that's right. And I would expect Lamberth would carry it as House Majority Leader in the House.
I don't know. I don't think so. I think it'd be a chairman of education.
Okay. I think Jack Johnson's over in the Senate. He's already announced he's carrying it in the Senate.
William might file it, but I think he would put. It would make sense to put some in education.
You are broadly. I mean, you have invested your time and energy in the issue of education since as long as I've known you.
Yes, sir.
And you are broadly speaking supportive of the legislation.
Yeah, I got to see the language to see how it's going to flesh out.
Sure. Bruno is next up in the borough. Hey, Bruno, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing fine. So I have a question. Why does the funding even need to be additive? Why can't it be net zero, where when students take the private outlet, it's deducted entirely from the budget of the local school district? That way we don't blow the budget up for the state. And in addition to that, we talk about capacity, but if we phase something like this in over a period of 10 years where maybe everybody's eligible for a $500 voucher in the first year, $1,000 in the second year, working its way up over the course of 10 years to some number equivalent to what they spend in the public schools, you'd give outside investors a chance to build up, alternative school systems and maybe even buy existing schools from the public school system that fail, but they have good facilities. So why not do it that way?
I'm not hanging up on Bruno.
Don't hang up, please.
Do you have?
I do.
Okay.
So to answer your first question about the redundancy of the funding, our public schools are funded based off of attendance. So if Matt Murphy attends a public school and now Matt Murphy's going to take advantage of the scholarship and Matt winds up going to a private school, the public school is not able to say that they have Matt in school. Therefore, the state will not fund Matt anymore in those schools.
Okay.
Now,
What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that?
Oh, there's nothing wrong with that, sir. But what happens is now you build up a surplus in the funding formula for the schools, for the public schools, which now gives us flexibility in the General Assembly to either pay teachers more that remain, to create a bigger pipeline of people who want to get involved.
And two, I mean, from a political perspective, I understand that the politics of this dictate that if you began subtracting money out of the public education system to add it to the private education system through a scholarship fund, the howls that we are already hearing would be exponentially louder.
That's correct. And let me tell you this, since 2018, since I've been elected to the General Assembly, the budget in 2019 was $9 billion in education, Matt. It's $14 billion now. Now,
that's a lot of money.
We are starting to see this worm turn in reading. You saw that this year with okay? But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Now, I will tell you, being around my colleagues, we are going to continue to invest in public education because the majority of students are going to go to public schools. We need to make them as good as they possibly can be and productive as they possibly can be.
On the super text line up and running, 615-737-9986. Why are you state officials, why are you state officials taking more taxes from me to fund this voucher type thing? Why not from the school budgets, since it's the schools that have failed? And don't say you served my child, I'm homeschooled. Why not? I mean, it kind of is a bounce from the question that was asked before the break. Why aren't you taking this out of budgets? If kids are moving out of the public education system into the private education system, and we are, as a state, supplementing the cost of doing that, why aren't we moving that money with the kids?
So let's be cautious at first to make sure this program is going to work before we invest billions of dollars into this thing.
All right.
Let's make sure that we get some good data. Now, that's why the ESA, the Educational Savings Account, Governor Lee's voucher bill from 2019 that was tied up in the courts for 2 years, that's why it's important to get that data on the success of those students so we can hang our hat to say, hey, this does work. It's about getting educational outcomes for these kids in a better situation than we are right now in Tennessee. Now, public schools are not going away, Matt, in Tennessee.
Of course not.
Trust me, they're not going away. And the funding for public schools is still going to stay there. We are not, let me say this again, we are not increasing taxes on anybody.
Well, then where's the money coming from?
So in our budget, and I asked this question on the House floor last year because I was curious. Our budget last year, I think, was $56 billion with a B, $56 billion. And I asked the chairman of finance, hey, out of that $56 billion, how much money is being spent on one-time expenditures that we won't spend on next year? It's recurring money for non-recurring expenses. And the answer was, I think, $13 billion. So we have the money. That's why we gave $3 billion to TDOT to start to get caught up on back projects, because we financially manage this state in a very conservative way.
So wait a minute. You guys are overtaxing the citizens of Tennessee to the tune of $13 billion?
You know what's crazy? Is we don't have that thing called a state income tax, Matt. Do you know what it is? It is a testament. Hold on. Let me finish. It is a testament to the people of this state that believe in Tennessee's economy, that go out and spend things and buy things. Now, we'd give a lot of money back to locals via parks, recreation, grants, trying to funnel that money that we don't need back to the locals to let them use it to make their communities better.
I mean, when you guys have trouble figuring out where to spend that money, I can think of a radio show host scholarship fund program that we maybe could initiate at some point.
So there'll be legislation that I'll put in place to make sure that doesn't happen.
Poe is next up out of Franklin, wants to talk about the homeschooling aspect of this. Poe, you're on with Scott Cepicky. Good afternoon.
Hi there. How are y'all?
Good.
Very good.
I was calling. I know earlier in the show you kind of questioned, does it cost $7,000 to homeschool? And I just wanted to chime in. I've been homeschooling for 14 years, and I'll give you just an example of this year. We're at a 2-day tutorial. That's $3,100. My history curriculum this year costs $400. My science curriculum costs $300, and my kids are in a carpentry shop class, which is $700. That's $4,500 right there. Also, a lot of people go to a homeschool convention for to hear speakers, learn about curriculum, get encouragement. That's $1,500. Then if you take 5 field trips out of state at $150 a piece, you're up to $6,800. So it's very easy to come to the $7,000 figure. But my main question would be, if I took this money for my children, what does the state need to have from me? Because I know when I've looked into being in sports programs at schools here in Franklin, the school wants to know your whole curriculum, which I'm kind of confused as why the school needs to know my curriculum if my son's just going to be playing basketball.
Poe, keep listening online, because there are several questions regarding the homeschooling aspect to this, and you keep listening as Scott Cepicky answers some of these questions. One other person says, hey, Matt, please don't hang up on me. Ha ha. That's funny. But curious about the homeschool factor. My family recently started homeschooling. How will this bill affect homeschool families? Will it be a tax credit? Or is there some way to return the, quote, public school tax dollars to families that homeschool?
So that is the portion of the bill that's going to get the most scrutiny, is how, because I can tell you this, I've heard from homeschoolers across the state, and their main thing to me is leave me alone. I've chosen to get out of public education. Let me educate my kids. And that's what I've always tried to live on with homeschoolers. What we have to make sure, and is she still on?
And she is not.
Okay. I wish I could ask her is, one of the questions that I'm trying to figure out is if we could craft the bill in a way that would allow the homeschoolers to access the $7,000, but with literally zero strings attached to it, because they're taxpayers in Tennessee. They pay sales tax. They pay their property tax. Would that satisfy them? And trust me, in my office, I guarantee you I'm going to have homeschoolers in my office about this legislation. And I welcome that because I want to talk to them to get this right. It does cost a lot of money.
But if you start spending some of my tax dollars for the purpose of homeschooling these kids, wouldn't you, as a representative of my tax dollar, want some form of guarantee that that education is up to the standards that we would expect it to be?
And so that's where the legislation comes in, is where you make that an opt-in for homeschoolers.
Right.
If they opt in, eyes wide open going into this, here's what's going to be required of you if you take this money.
Yeah, this is the expectation,
right,
coming back from, whatever it might be, testing or whatever.
And it's the same thing with private schools, right? Eyes wide open. If you allow a student to come with a scholarship, here's what the state's going to expect of you. And that is where I do my job in filling in that legislation.
Do you expect, and maybe this hasn't been determined yet, from a homeschool perspective, that this will come in the form of a tax credit? It will come in the form of an actual monetary payment?
Well,
to the homeschool family?
Okay, so in a tax credit situation, those are states that have state income taxes.
Well, I understand
so
that.
We don't have that.
But my point is that you mentioned the private school scenario would be that the parent applies to a private school, gets accepted to said private school, and then that 7,000-ish monetary payment goes directly to the private school in increments of some form. And so I'm asking how will that happen in the homeschool?
So if you remember what she said about the $3,100, she pays into a cooperative, right?
Right.
So that cooperative could be tasked by the state of collecting the attendance records and sending those attendance records to the state, so the state knows where to send the $3,100 to pay for her $3,100 fees to gain access to that cooperative.
See, I'm already hearing my homeschool parents out there in the listening audience red flag this as a way to turn their homeschool situation into a private school situation, which is something that I don't think they want to do.
That is the nuances of the bill, right? We've got to figure out how to, let's face it, homeschoolers are homeschooling they don't want to be part of the government situation. They don't want to be part of the government solution, right? They want to right? They want to be autonomous. So, first of all, it's going to be opt-in, obviously. But second of all, how do we help them? Right? It's real cost to her, right? Real money to her.
Well, yeah, a lot of times when families make the decision to homeschool, and by the way, I want to make sure that all of you homeschool folks know, because I don't want anyone to think that I was suggesting that it doesn't cost you any money to homeschool. And Poe, I appreciate you clearing that up. That's not my suggestion. What I was saying is that you don't cut a check to a private institution in the same fashion that people that take their kids to private school do. Right. It's a different type of cost, but that cost involves, a parent deciding not to work and staying home with their kid, that sort of thing.
Right.
Right?
And those homeschooler accreditation agencies, they're accredited. So in the bill, we may put something in there that says we just send the money, but here's devil's in the details, right? Well, if I send the money, what do they got to give us back as a taxpayer, right? Mm-hmm. You want to make sure that you're not just throwing your money away. You want to make sure these kids are getting educated. So we don't want these quote unquote places popping up all over the place. Matt Murphy's, Education Society that is trying.
It's a great idea.
No, it's not. It's a bad idea.
The MMES.
Oh, golly. But this is what I'm trying to tell people right now is it's eyes wide open, folks. We've got to get the legislation in front of us so that we can start to talk to people and figure out homeschoolers. Is there anything we can do to help you, or is it better just to say it's opt in if you want to do it? Right.
And what you just said made sense. So a lot of families that choose to homeschool, they might not have the structural ability to know how to do that, but they lean on other places and other, I would assume, I bet I can be inundated with them if I asked.
Right.
Organizations that provide materials, but there's a cost to providing that material and that structure for the homeschool parent. So that it could be a supplement to that.
So if we could say, hey, we can help pay for that for you with no strings attached. Is that okay with you? Even though it's opt in. Right? Mm-hmm. So we got to make it where the homeschoolers and the people that are going to take advantage of this to private schools, it's got to be opt in. It can't be mandatory anywhere, right? It's opt in. So you go into this eyes wide open. Here's what the legislation says. And if you're okay with it, opt into it.
Jackson is in Lawrenceburg. Jackson, you're on with Scott Cepicky and Matt Murphy on the Murphy Show on Super Talk. Hello, Jackson.
Hey, how y'all doing?
Doing well, sir.
No, I wanted to comment on that. I've got a 16-year-old in high school, and all through elementary school, they use textbooks like I did growing up in school. And he made not only hundreds, but he made 108s, 110s, and he was doing. I was looking forward to when he got in high school, he'd be valedictorian someday, And on the SAT 10 scores, he was, I think, in the upper 6% in the state. And that was all the way through 1 to 5. When he left the 5th grade and started middle school, he was on 11th, 10th grade level in the 5th grade. He gets to the middle school, and then the ball game starts. And it's more concentration on ball teams, and they got everything in the world. Now, it's not only baseball, football, and basketball, but soccer, badminton, fishing teams, shooting teams, everything you can think of. And more of the money has been spent on that and Chromebooks. Chromebooks was the biggest mess it ever was, because he comes home having problems in geometry or anything, and he's making failing grades, and I say, son, where's your book? Used to at the beginning of every chapter of some kind of new math or anything, they would have 4 or 5 examples worked out so you could say, oh, yeah, there's how you do it. Well, I can't help him at home because I can't even see what he's doing at school. It's all on the Chromebook. And when he goes to school, he sits in a class, the teacher tells him what to do on the Chromebooks, and they're doing no teaching at all other than telling them what to do. They could be very well doing that at home. So my suggestion on the vouchers is they are a good thing, but when they just started giving them to like Shelby and Davidson County, that was bad because it should have been open to every county. And if they would just cut out public schools altogether and these private schools, see, they got to keep good teachers. If they don't, you will take your kid out of that school or not doing good, put them in another. It's like any other kind of business. You don't like the service, you go somewhere else. When you're in public school, you have no choice. You send your child to that school that don't matter what the education they're being taught or how bad the teacher is or anything else. They've got to go there. But look at the money that would be saved and the better education that the kids would get if they would give them all vouchers and let them start these private schools, and they would try to compete with each other to get the students. They would have the best schools they could, the best teachers. To keep your child there, they would have better security to keep your child safe because you would want your child going to the best school. And look at the money that would be saved, because if you look at any school, the gym is the biggest part of it with high ceilings and all. It takes more to heat and cool that gym than it does the rest of the whole school. And just a few kids are...
Jackson, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I was trying not to interrupt you, but I'm very limited on time. Is there a final question or final thought before I get Scott's thoughts on all of this?
Yeah, I think they should go on with the program, the voucher program, and eventually phase out and cancel all of those trillions of dollars being spent on these schools that are not doing anything to educate our kids.
I mean, Jackson's talking about privatizing school altogether. Wasn't he?
Well, that was it.
That was kind of the end thought there.
I think I think you get into a capacity issue. We have enough schools that probably most private schools in the state are on a wait list right now. And that's only 100,000 students statewide. And we've got 1 million students in the system. How
does it, and not to interrupt you, but in the 2 minutes or so, I mean, it wasn't my specific intention to do that, but I recognize that we only have about a minute left. Explain again, let's just circle back to, how does this make public school better?
Well, one, it'll create competition, but it'll drive people to look at the things that we're not doing is why people are leaving, and they can start to address those shortcomings. The funding is there, Matt. We've increased this budget almost $5 billion in 5 years.
So it's not a money issue.
It's not a money issue, and we need more people getting into the profession, and that's why we passed with the governor increasing teacher pay. We've got to get more competitive in the market with unemployment at 2%, right? Mm-hmm. You've got to get more competitive in the market to attract more people to your business. And let me tell you, education is a $14 billion a year business in Tennessee. And it is. And so we have got to do more things from Davidson to Mountain City to Memphis. We have got to do more things at the legislature to make education more attractive.
It will be the issue in the General Assembly come January. Agree?
You think?
I mean,
we could probably move the capital to Knoxville and nobody would know it.
Well,
we're not going to do that, folks.
Let's not.
We're
do
not
that.
doing that. But yeah, this is going to be the bill.
Thank you for the better part of the hour. Obviously, we'll have you back multiple times between now and then to describe this as more details come out about the legislation. Thank you, Scott.
Appreciate it.
There's Representative Scott Cepicky joining us to give his understanding of what's going on with the governor's proposal.